I'm interested in the idea of understanding memory through multiple different ways. I try to bring that into my work through photographic interventions. I'm also interested in understanding how image making plays a role in it, whether it's moving image or still image. The intention with the performance is for me to see how do we remember and what does the body remember. Most times memory we think of as being internal, but I also think that memory could be externalized through a performance. Somehow the work doesn't feel complete unless I bring my body into it through movement. So the movement part is trying to understand what the body remembers. It's also trying to find assertion, it's trying to find rootedness to the space, and it's finding comfort through that movement. So when I look back and I understand the space around me and I'm actually being able to move around that space, my memory also works differently. So each time I'm actually in that space or I'm moving, it makes me feel a different way. So the words are speaking about the experience. The words are speaking about what it made me feel. And the words are also allowing me to remember things that I may have forgotten or remember them differently. So that's what I'm writing on. It's sort of externalizing that discomfort. Memory is not always about nostalgia. Sometimes I do think of that. And memory and image making, sometimes we look at a photograph thinking it's reality, but it is not. It's perceived reality. And I'm interested in that space of understanding what is perceived reality in that photograph and what is actual reality, right? So a lot of my current work is a little bit of that nostalgia, a little bit of trying to break that sense of nostalgia. It is not always what we think it is.
For me, it was also interesting to see how, salt process has a ephemeral quality to it, has this way of disappearing, has this impermanence, which is somewhere connected to who this, the collection as well, because this unpredictability, who they are, what they do, are they still alive, are they still around? And I felt since salt will anyway make them kind of disappear over a period of time, it felt like the right fit. And for me to edge each of the portrait with my own hair was also important, because it was in a way me trying to not let them go and not let it disappear, but at the same time the inevitable would happen. Once Kanike started, we were completely indulging ourselves in slowing ourselves. There was a process of just taking a step back and slowing and working with the hand. And I felt the analog process really fitted with what I was trying to do. And I was very excited to learn salt. We already finished learning cyanotypes. We were moving on to multiple different processes. I think there's wet plate collidin, gum bichromates, all these we're trying to experiment with. And it need not be like, oh, I will work with every medium. It's about, if there is a meaning to what I'm trying to express and the medium speaks to it, then that's the match for me. For me, it's not the medium that comes first. It's always what I want to say, the conversations that I want to have. Though I was not too decisive of having a certain place in history, or placing the project in a certain time or place as such, I was very aware of pointing fingers and just trying to have conversations around it. I said, this is me presenting, now let's talk. And if that has caused us to think as to who these women are or which part of the world they come from, it's great, because then we are talking about it. So, but there is no conscious placement, but definitely I am instigating a conversation here.
I've always been interested in the art of printing, right? So I've always been, keen on applying to residencies where I can really have a hands-on experience with printing, darkroom techniques, and eventually into the historic processes of photographic printing. So I've been part of the Goa CAP in 2013. That's when I first met Arpan. And then, there was a long stint in between where I didn't have access to the darkroom. So I was, trying to make a living as a documentary photographer, primarily using the digital medium. And then there was another opportunity that came up in 2019 when Arpan had just set up his studio, and he was just beginning to take participants for his workshop. So I was very keen about reconnecting with Arpan and also picking up newer skills. Like, for example, the workshop that I attended was to do with wet plates. After that, it just seemed like a void coming back to Bangalore because I couldn't really practice these techniques because I didn't have a darkroom. And then I happened to be a part of another residency where I pitched a narrative which was to be completely translated into wet plates. But that involved actually setting up an entire darkroom in the place I was invited to, which was in Munich, the White Box Studios. When I eventually landed in Bangalore, the very next month, I decided to look for a place where I could actually set up a darkroom. And in the meantime, Arpan had also put me in touch with a lot of other people who had been practicing alternate processes and who were also looking to collaborate, and perhaps, the idea of setting up a collective darkroom was born sometime then.
The initial impetus, behind this work is really that, which is photography here to help us remember, or does it help us forget? And what is the value also of forgetting and of oblivion? I am interested in the gesture of erasure, and in this case, like, instead of having nature and accidents like do it for us, which has its own poetry, like, I try to make those erasures and deletions happen by my own choice, even though there is always like an element of accident, which is what the analog process is also how it's interesting. I had a form, I had a technique that I was exploring, and I had explored it with video earlier in that Bodyguard Lane album project with Bind. But when the first lockdown happened, I started photographing details of those damaged prints. I wanted a plastic, as you say in French, there was a plastic exploration, which means like a material exploration of a certain kind. And I knew I was going towards there, but I needed to build a conceptual framework behind. I had to find what was the message that was potentially there lying within the form. So I mean, it's always a dialectical process. Like, it's never like both these elements come in support of each other. And yeah, in this case, I knew also I had a strong intuition and desire to apply this analog technique of erasure to digital images which have no calling to know this destiny. Basically, I wanted to create situations that are improbable or impossible. I wanted that also coalescence of the inks with the pixel and the grain with the digital language. I mean, there's a grammar to also a digital image, and but still then I didn't know like what kind of digital image I would bring. And it all made sense when I read more about, it's called like the materiality of digital memory, and then I realized that what was the resources that were supporting digital image making today, and these were all minerals. And that's what drew me after that to exploring those sites that are now on display from different places and where different metals are extracted.
I produced this body of work since long, since 2013, intervening the whole space, the idea of migration and what exactly happened with different kind of an philosophical perspective. So that was the primary area. I was very much influenced by the Chinese philosophy of Taoism, and in my early stages of student life, and then I keep on continuing that ideology, thinking about it, where they are mentioning that okay, you live the society, you go to the forest, go to the landscape to self-realize yourself. And they were also mentioning that the selection of material, you try to figure it out, what kind of a material you are. And then what they were doing, they were making paintings, landscape paintings with ink and on paper or silk, with a kind of a very much of economical way. That has a deep impact of shaping my ideas around it. Migration was one of them. Now this migration I'm talking about, it's not a forced migration. This is not a migration where where it happened in the time of partition. It's not like that. It's a migration by choice and migration for a better life. It has deep rooted impact on agriculture. It has deep rooted impact on cultural sphere of India. I was interested that how when a creamy layer of the society, the educated layer of the society from a rural space leaves for a city, then what happens those who are remaining there? What happens to the agriculture? What happens to the land they used to hold? So that is primarily reason why I call it this series called Gola Bhara Dhan. Gola Bhara Dhan talks about the food security. So it has a larger context in Indian perspective, that how do you relate to that Gola Bhara Dhan with a kind of a migrations. So there are multiple layers, and through that multiple layers I also thought of using different materials in terms of as a kind of a metaphor of intimating it. The kind of research we did in Studio Goppo, that has a direct influence to the course curriculum in our department, in the Department of Printmaking. So we could incorporate a lot of 19th century photographic printmaking processes into a form of the conventional printmaking methods.
I think one of the things that was sort of striking to me as soon as the exhibition went up was just the realization that a lot of the artworks that are in the space currently are being exhibited within an exhibition context for the first time. So like unknowingly somehow it just ended up being a very collaborative process with the artist, like just trying to figure out what the manifestation of this work, what the realization of this work could look like in space. So I think that was like maybe one of the biggest shifts for me between thinking about it in the SketchUp idea and translating that within the exhibition space. Even with my show at Bard, I think there was always this idea of just trying to explore how much design can intervene within an exhibition space, because like at least in school that's how it felt, that design somehow is kept at an arm's length from the exhibition space, like it's meant to be far more functional than expressive. So like I feel like this was a great opportunity, because I mean combining, since I was working on both the design and the exhibition design of the space, I sort of had to I had to keep an eye on both things at the same hand, but also had that space to explore how much design could intervene in the space.